Hi, I'd like to talk to you today about the relationship between science and religion, particularly as it pertains to the origin or existence of the universe, also in light of the creation story as recorded in the Bible in Genesis chapter 1. Uh, in the Bible, Genesis chapter 1 says that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and the Spirit of God was moving over the face of the waters. And then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And it goes on from there, and it says that the next day, there was one day, and then the second day, something else happened, and the third day, something else happened. On the fourth day, the sun and the moon and the stars appeared. So there are many people who would have you believe that the relationship between science and religion is just untractable. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Um, there's an inviolable wall between science and religion. You either believe in science, which is based on facts and cold hard evidence, or based on religion, which is theory. And so there are some people who say you just can't put the two together. All right, there are those who are today called young Earth creationists or strict creationists who believe the Bible said God created the world in 20 days, in 6 days. They say it's six 24-hour days, and and that's it. And the rest of the history is in the Bible, about 6,000 years. So, according to them, the earth was created by God in 6 days, and that happened 6,000 years ago. And all evidence of fossil records going back hundreds of millions of years, somehow that's all a trick that God put there to fool scientists so that they would become disbelievers. On the other hand, you have many hardcore, devout, atheist, agnostic scientists who believe that anything smacking of religion is preposterous and unscientific, and therefore anyone who's a scientist cannot believe in God or the Bible or anything religious or spiritual. Well, first of all, I want to say that historically, many great scientists were devout Christians, were devout believers. I'll give you two examples, which I've done in another video. Um, Isaac Newton was a true believer in God. He was a Unitarian, and he believed that because God created the universe and God is logical and he created us with a logical mind, God created us with a logical mind, therefore we should be able to understand the universe. And Newton came up with the laws of gravity and the laws of motion, which has suited us for the last 300 or 400 years. And Gregor Mendel, by tending his peas, he was an Augustinian monk, uh, not quite 200 years ago, who discovered the laws of inheritance, what became the basics of genetics, by planting peas and watching them, how they how he mixed them, what happened when you mix different kinds of pea plants. um, the fact is that there have been many people who were very devout believers who had no problem engaging in scientific discovery. But many people today it's true 500 years ago, 40 years ago, the church would sometimes suppress scientists who whom they did not agree with or did not believe. They would, in some cases, kill them or put them in house arrest. There were cases like this. But unfortunately, today it's somewhat on the opposite foot, the shoe here, because there are many atheist scientists who will suppress religion or religious ideas or religious people who have brilliant ideas, but they don't want to tolerate them because of their religious background. And a case in point is very important here with theories of the origin of the universe. um, A little over 100 years ago, astronomers began noticing that very distant stars seemed to be redshifted. What does redshifted mean? Well, perhaps an example would be the Doppler effect. It's somewhat similar. If you hear a fire engine or a police car coming at you, it goes and then as it goes away, it goes the pitch seems to go up as it's coming toward you and seems to go back down as it's going away from you. This is because when something is traveling toward you at high speed, the sound waves get somewhat compressed, and so the pitch seems to go up. And as they're going away from you at high speed, the sound wave seems to get stretched and go down a little bit. The same thing happens with light. If you have a bright object in the sky coming toward you at an incredible velocity, the light rays get somewhat compressed and are blue shifted toward the higher, you know, frequency. And as it's going away from you at a high speed, very, very high velocity, then the light gets somewhat redshifted or goes to a lower velocity. So scientists noticed a little over 100 years ago that many distant stars and things in the sky seem to be experiencing this redshift. In 1927, there was a Belgian physicist priest. His name was George Lemaître. That's in English George Lemaître, Lemaitre, who was a very reputable physicist. He was looking at Albert Einstein's theory of relativity and just playing with the numbers a bit, and he came to the conclusion that, according to Einstein's theory of relativity, the universe must be expanding. And not only that, this expansion of the universe would explain the redshift. When you looked at distant galaxies, the further away things are, the more they are expanding, the more they redshift. Um, Einstein did not like this idea. He did not like it at all. And many other scientists of the day who were atheists did not like it. But then 2 years later, uh, Edwin Hubble, who was doing research at the Wilson Observatory in California, discovered the same thing. And he published a paper saying that the universe is expanding and that's what causes the redshift. And this became known as Hubble's law. And there's a certain constant uh, velocity to it, expansion, so it's called the Hubble constant. But actually, the physicist priest George Lemaître, had predicted this 2 years earlier. Not only that, Lemaître continued his research and said, well, what I see is that according to the numbers that I'm getting, the universe must have started from an initial single point, and there must have been an incredible explosion of radiation at the very beginning of the universe. And so the universe at the very beginning would have been entirely intense radiation, plasma, that would be so hot, so incredibly hot, that there would be no possibility of any kind of matter. No atoms, or protons, electrons. They couldn't have matter because it was too hot. It was just radiation, just light. And so people didn't like this because it sounded like the book of Genesis. That in the beginning God said that there be light, and there was light. So certain scientists of the day decided they did not like this, even though this guy was not basing it on Genesis. He was basing it on what he saw in Einstein's theories. He was just following the numbers. But they said, no, it sounds like Genesis, therefore we cannot accept it. So they developed a different theory called the steady state model of the universe. They said the universe did not spring into being at some point in time. The universe has been here eternally. And they called it the steady state theory of the universe. And the steady state theory of the universe is that everything in the universe is here, it's always existed, and yes, we have to agree with the science that it may be expanding, but the density of the universe is always the same. whenever old stars die, new stars spring out of somewhere. New matter is always being created so that the density, the general overall density of the universe is constant. There's no place where it's more compact or less compact. The density of everything in the universe is generally constant, and there's no sort of beginning point. They were very, very insistent that the universe did not begin. And the reason was this, that if you say that the universe has a beginning, whether you call it, as Lemaître did, the primeval atom, or people pejoratively said, oh, that's just a Big Bang theory. But the point is, if there's a Big Bang, that implies there's a Big Banger, a God. And so many scientists were absolutely committed to atheism that they could not accept the evidence that there might have been a point in time where the universe began. However, in 1964, researchers at Princeton University and at Bell Labs in New Jersey were looking into the far reaches of the universe and discovered that there was kind of a smudge of light. Not the far reaches, yeah, the far reaches of the universe. They were looking at the far reaches of the universe and they saw a kind of a smudge of light 15 billion light years away. And they realized that this is what they call the cosmic microwave background. In other words, this is the residue of the light which existed at the beginning of the universe. Let me explain a little bit about this. In terms of astronomy, you generally don't measure things in terms of miles. Things are measured in terms, at least on the larger reaches, in terms of light years. That's because the amount of distance light covers in a year. Light travels at 186,000 miles per second, or 300,000 kilometers per second. So, for example, the nearest star to our sun is Proxima Centauri, which is about just over 4 light years away. So when you look at this light coming from that star, Proxima Centauri, it is actually light that originated over 4 years ago. It takes that long to get here. And as you look at things, the nearest galaxy to the Milky Way, our galaxy, is the Andromeda galaxy, which is 2.5 million light years away. So any light coming from Andromeda is 2.5 million years old. It started 2.5 million years ago. So as you look at things which are further and further away, you're actually seeing things as they existed several million or even billion years ago. So that's why when you're looking at very distant reaches of the universe, you're actually, in a sense, looking backwards into the past because you're seeing what was there. And so these researchers who discovered this cosmic microwave background realized they were looking at the early universe when there was no matter. It was only light, this plasma, this dense, incredible light energy which existed before matter existed. In other words, the early universe was so hot and so dense with light that matter could not exist. It was too hot. And so scientists since that time have realized that it took almost 400,000 years before the universe cooled off enough so that matter as we see it today could come into existence, could actually form. And that means that it's only after 400,000 years that stars, suns, and planets began to form after 400,000 years after the so-called Big Bang. Now, what's interesting is, if you look at the book of Genesis then, which says that in the beginning God said that let there be light, and there was light, and then it was some time after that that the sun and the moon and the stars came into existence. This is exactly what George Lemaître had predicted, and this is exactly what the scientific research done in the last 100 years has come to realize. It's actually true. It very much corresponds to the book of Genesis. The sad thing is that for several decades, more than a half century, many very genuine scientists, astronomers, physicists, refused to accept Lemaître's theory simply because it looked too much like Genesis. And they said, we don't want to accept anything which looks like there was a beginning to the universe. Because if there's no beginning, then the universe has always been here. There's no God. So today, when people say, do you believe in science or do you believe in religion? Well, the book of Genesis, if you interpret it narrowly as being, oh, the world was created in 6 24-hour days, yeah, that's not very scientific. And people who are scientists can't really accept that. But if you look at Genesis as talking about the creation of the universe over time, then there's no problem with that looking at it scientifically, unless you are a committed atheist who refuses to accept anything which implies that there is a creator or a God or rationale to the universe. Now, I bring this up because in science there are two kinds of atheism. One is methodological or experimental atheism, which means when you do a scientific experiment, you want to look at it atheistically, naturalistically. You don't want to start reaching for supernatural causes for anything. You know, back hundreds or thousands of years ago, when people were faced with volcanoes or whatever, they'd say, oh, the gods are angry. But there are physical, natural causes for volcanic activity. When people used to get sick, they'd say, oh, he's possessed by a demon or this or that. But no, there are physical causes to disease, whether it's germs or viruses or whatever it is. And science, by taking a methodologically atheistic, materialistic point of view, they have researched the causes of disease and the causes of natural phenomena and discovered amazing things about the nature of the universe and found, cures for diseases which plagued humankind for millennia. So that kind of methodological atheism is really good because it makes us focus on what we can know through our observation and through our reason. What can we know about the universe as it exists, about human bodies, about biology? That's very good. But philosophical atheism is something different. Philosophical atheism is when you say, I will look at all experimental data except data which implies that there's a creator or there's a God or there's a reason for anything. Anything which says there's a purpose to life or a purpose to the universe, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to look at it. So scientists who claim to be good scientists but refuse to accept anything which smacks of implying religion or God or creator, they're just cutting out half their brain, saying, I'm not going to use this half of my brain because I don't like it. I don't feel comfortable. It makes me feel uneasy to think about that. So for half a century or more, many astronomers and physicists refused to accept this inflationary model of the universe simply because it made them uneasy. It seemed too much like Genesis. And I have to say that this physicist, George Lemaître, he didn't start out trying to prove Genesis. He was just looking at Einstein's theory of relativity and applying it, just doing the equations, and that's what he came up with. Einstein finally agreed with him that he was right, that the universe was expanding, and many of the other things that he said seemed to follow. My point is that in my opinion, there is no inviolable wall between science and religion. There is a wall between people who refuse to comprehend science and only want to look at a very, very, how can I say, a view of the Bible which says the Bible has to be this way and life has to be exactly the way they interpret the Bible to mean, and everything else is wrong. And then there are scientists who say I can believe anything except those things which seem to imply that there is reason to believe in religion. And unfortunately, the world today, as I said, 500 years ago, the religious leaders could imprison or even kill scientists they didn't agree with. Today, it's more the case that scientific atheists want to belittle and make fun of people who think that the universe makes sense, that human beings maybe have a place in it. Um, I could go on about this forever and talking about the fine tuning of the universe and all sorts of stuff, but I won't. I want to focus just today on the book of Genesis and the Genesis account. One other thing I would like to point out is that the Genesis account is very different from other cosmologies or creation stories of other religions. If you look at other religions um, in the past several thousand years, many of them have very bizarre creation stories about gods eating each other or ripping each other apart and using their bodies to make things and creating human beings as their servants and then sort of making plants and animals and stuff as an afterthought. It's very kind of hodgepodge, hectic. But the book of Genesis says, in addition to talking about light being created first and then planets and stars later, it also talks about the origin of life on Earth. And it says that the very first life on Earth were plants, was plants. Plants were created first by God, and then ocean life, things which swam in the ocean, were second, and then birds, and then finally, land animals, and eventually man. And what's interesting about this is that that sequence of how life appeared is exactly what geologists and paleontologists and other researchers have found in the fossil record, in the geologic record. You know, life began with plants, sometimes microscopic plants, and then microscopic animals in the ocean, and then land. Then eventually life creeped onto land, and then you have birds, and you have land animals, and you have human beings. Finally, this is what is found in the fossil record. So it's very odd. The person who wrote Genesis creation story was not a scientist. He was just some guy, I don't know, maybe a farmer or something, living in the Middle East 3 or 4 thousand years ago. And he didn't have scientific tools at his, at hand. And he didn't. I doubt that he was a, you know, geologist researcher going through fossil records. No, he was just said this is what God told me. So you can believe or not. I'm not here to convince you to believe one way or another about anything. What I want to bring out is the point, if you want to be successful as a scientist or as a human being, it's important to keep an open mind. If you want to say, I am a scientist, I search for facts, okay, then as a scientist, you should follow the facts, follow the empirical data wherever it leads. And don't say, I'll follow any empirical data except the data which leads me to believe that there might be a creator. I'm not going to accept that data. I'm going to just throw it out. I'm going to try to make up other stories so that I don't have to believe that data. In the same way, if you're a religious person, you say, well, I'm going to believe the Bible and I'm going to throw out everything that disagrees with my interpretation of the Bible. I don't care if scientists say diseases is caused by germs. I think it's caused by evil spirits, and therefore I'm not going to wash or bathe or do anything. I'm just going to follow the Bible. Either extreme is bizarre. Unfortunately, in today's world, it's more often the atheists, scientists, who really put down anyone who says they have a belief in God or they have a belief that there's a reason for the universe to be. What I want to say is, if you want to be successful in life, whether you're a scientist or whatever you are, then you should keep an open mind. And if you want to be a scientist and follow the evidence, then follow it. Follow the evidence where it leads. And don't say, I will follow any evidence except this evidence over here. I don't like that evidence. No, follow the evidence where it leads. So, again, I hope this video has been helpful to you. And I hope you will, in fact, uh, keep an open mind. And again, I'm not here to tell you what to believe, but weigh the evidence, whatever it is. Look at the facts. And don't discount people simply because you don't like where they're coming from. Sometimes people tell me something. I'm not always happy with what they say to me. Maybe I didn't like the way they said it. Maybe I don't even like that person all that much. I don't respect them all that much. But I have to stop and think, well, they said this to me. Is what they said true or not? If it's true, then I should deal with it. And I shouldn't discount it just because I don't like the way they said it. Now, I think in human relations that's kind of hard. We generally don't like it when people tell us things if they don't say it the right way. And I'm in favor of being very diplomatic and being, very congenial in talking to people. But again, I think it's very important if we want to succeed. It's very important if we want to succeed in life to have an open mind and an open heart. All right, that's it. Have a great day. Bye bye.